The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Ah, Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Renato had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Ravens caw about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice.
It's not personal, but your mother wears army boots on her ears.
Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lapino. Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who happened to also be a deadly sorcerer, and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the transcend... It's beautiful here, thought Renato. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lapino was a traitor. But still, it was good company. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Renato hoped that this port had been inspected recently. Renato felt the forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones, but no healthy ones. And getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lupino was right. Maybe he should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato...
Tell you what,
said Lupino.
I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost.
The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lupino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. As Lupino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lupino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs, and he'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore. He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lupino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in the sector. Right? Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lupino. Of course he had to let Lupino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? Renato took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lupino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lupino again? And now the Empire had the core. Renato hailed the rebel base to warn them. But their far speaker didn't crowd back. Was the base under attack too? Lupino would have to wait. The core would have to wait. Renato had a very bad feeling that something was going terribly wrong at the rebel base. Its location was secret, but secrets can be discovered. There were Imperials everywhere in the ruins, and dead civilians. The Ravens were killing everything in sight. Renato was relieved to see no rebels among the dead. Maybe the secret base was still secret, but there were huge burn marks on buildings. What monstrous weapon was the Empire using here? The core had great power. Had they harnessed it somehow, even though they didn't have the armature? Renato thought about the intel he'd gathered from the outpost. Who would he bring it to? Who even had time to read it? He could smell charred flesh and hear screams. The ruins were on fire. The Ravens had rigged up the core as some kind of burning ray. They wouldn't need to know the secret location. They were burning everything. It was killing them too. Their black feathers littered the path. He would have to take the core from them. It was the last thing he wanted to do. As the last Raven fell, Renato felt worse than he ever had. The core was killing him, again. The council members cautiously came out into the smoke. "You saved us," croaked the speaker. They would put the weaponized core deep in a cavern, she promised, where its poison could harm no one. They would heal him if they could, she said. No, it's a weapon now. We need one. I'll lead the charge. "It will kill you," croaked the speaker. "I guess it already has," Renato said. She bobbed her head gravely. "When all this is over," she said, "we'll name our new capital city for you." He flew towards the Imperial fleet, a myriad ships in disciplined formation, waiting for the signal to destroy the rebellion forever. Behind him, the rebels were charging. If he failed, they would die. And so the final battle began. Everything hurt. It was unpleasant to fight this way. With each blow he struck with his sword, he felt weaker. Yet each time the core fired, it got brighter. As if the heat from the burning ravens and buildings only fed its hunger. He wondered where Lapino was. Wasn't he supposed to be in the battle? No. He'd been captured, hadn't he? Oh, Renato's mind was smoky now, like the burning fleet. I hope this wouldn't take long. Opus Major? Lando Nardo. If they were going to name a capital city after him, well, he just wished he had a better name. Where was Lupino? He missed Lupino's bitter outbursts. Or did he? Lupino had gotten him into this mess, hadn't he? The core was a wonderful weapon. It swept fire across the fleet. Ravens exploded in its gaze, and with every heartbeat it grew lighter. He would die. But he would die every hero. Spectacularly, changing history like the legendary heroes of lore. Or was it Yore? He couldn't remember anymore. Reynardo fell to his knees. The Emperor's bodyguards were lined up before his ship. Fierce ravens, all. And Zenobia. She was conjuring. He could not take another step. All he could do was fire the core. The ravens, Zenobia, the ship, all burst into flames, disintegrated, and blew away. So they had one, after all. The core grew brighter. He shielded his eyes, but he could still see it through his sleeves and through the flesh of his arm. And then he felt heat, as the fire grew to consume both fleets. And then he felt nothing. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. And he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Reynardo finally realized that Lupino was a traitor to the cause. And maybe Reynardo could use that somehow. Ah, Lupino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lupino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lupino's... Lupino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled to the ravens?
Oh, someone needs a fire.
That was odd. Bernardo had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. This time, there were so many more ravens.
Guys actually tell each other apart. Because I'm thinking name tags.
Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest. Dirty and bloody, Bernardo finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Bernardo recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, we see this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows. And that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who happened to also be a deadly sorcerer, and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him.
On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. She'd been Renado's best friend in Sword Fu school. And you're still mad for her, the rabbit reminded him.
The rabbit had a point. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. Why was Lupino urging him to capture Zenobia? Obviously it was a trap. But you never knew how Lupino thought. Sometimes his plans were so convoluted they did the exact opposite to what Lupino wanted. Yeah, there must be some way to play on that, Bernardo thought.
So, what's this plan of yours? Use me as bait, said Lupino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lupino dressing as an old blind toad, and Reynardo hiding inside a monstrous watermelon. What could possibly go wrong? Thought Reynardo.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sure you know better,
said Lupino.
Hey, who do I have to kill to get a drink around here?
You?
Okay.
Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She became smoke. And he noticed he had a blade to his throat. Stay a while. Purred. Now I just wanted some privacy, Reynardo said. Reynardo knew she still had feelings for him. Maybe he could just cut to the chase. But was timing right for that? Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? And he told her why. His Imperial Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. They could make him immortal. But to seal the bargain, he needed a sacrifice. The scientists at the observatory have resurrected one of... Caught up with him. Don't... Scientists on this island had been investigating the Emperor's dark ritual on their own. They were neutral in the civil war engulfing the Empire, but they could see that the dark magics the old toad had loosed were changing the world. Reynardo hoped he and Zenobia weren't putting them in danger. From the rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared around, shocked. "Take me to your council," she said, shaken. "I have things to tell them." It was what Renato had gambled on. The Zenobia would turn against her father once she knew his madness. But the rebel base was secret. Could he really risk taking the Emperor's daughter there, even if she did love him? Renato reached Lupino by Farspeaker Toad.
No, we should take her to the base,
Insisted Lupino. "No, I don't trust her. Nobody changes sides that fast," said Renato.
I better go to the base. Let them know you've got her.
Lupino said.
For some reason, Renato wasn't sure that was a good idea.
"Just meet me at the far side of the mountains. There's a shuttle here I can take,"
Always has to be your way, doesn't it?
said Lupino. Zenobia was still shaking as they got out. "I didn't know," she said. "The Ravens kept it secret. At first they sacrificed prisoners, then villages near the frontier, and then an orphanage. Kittens and puppies. Sometimes he'd come back to the palace and it was like there were glowing things behind his eyes. I was so busy." "I'll clear a path for us," Renato told Zenobia, "so the Ravens don't see you."
Hey, is that a word for a lot of ravens? Like a doofus of ravens?
Zenobia came up as he massaged his sore arm. Her eyes were wet. "He's been saying strange to do experiments. And some were wrong." "They are banished, right?" said Renato. "Gone forever." I mean, he couldn't actually bring the old gods back, could he? She didn't answer him. That frightened him more than anything.
Wondered if he should have taken Zenobia to the rebel base for real. Maybe she wasn't playing him after all. After the bleak talk about the Emperor's dark secrets, he was regretting his suspicion. They came up on an empty shack. He gestured her in. "Where's the base?" she asked, confused. "I thought we could talk a bit first."
"Oh, you think I'm playing you?" She was furious. "I'm betraying my father who picked me out of an alley, and you think I'm playing you?"
She lashed out. Her claws sliced fire into his face. Energy boiled in her other paw. But before she could kill him, he slashed his sword into her heart. She staggered. "I could have loved you, you son of a bitch." And then she died. Renato stood there for hours, unable to move. Finally, a ship landed near him. Lapino had brought the Farfarer. On board the Farfarer, Lapino couldn't stop grinning. "I can't believe you actually killed her." "Why didn't I trust her?" Renato said. All he could feel was emptiness. "You killed the Emperor's daughter. You might want to run for it, if you care whether you live or die, that is." Since Renato didn't, he grabbed the wheel, and he sailed for the Imperial fleet. Renato had never felt worse. Zenobia had listened to him. She had trusted him. She had opened her eyes to her father's evil, to everything he had hoped for. He had taken her to a dirty shack. Was he so used to lying that he couldn't trust even the girl he had always loved? The portal was heavily guarded. It must go someplace they really didn't want it to go. see the rebels reeling back as he plunged into the ranks of the Ravens. He'd had to kill the girl he loved, but he'd also blown the biggest opportunity they could have had, to turn the Emperor's daughter against him. Oh, Renato could only laugh miserably. He was taking crazy chances now, swinging wildly. He expected the Ravens to take him at any moment, but they were running in fear. No one wants to fight a man who doesn't care if he lives. No one wants to fight a hero. Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of it. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time. He was exhausted. Could barely think. He wanted to stop thinking. The rebels were already finished, and he was the last. The Ravens were coming for him personally now, in waves. It didn't matter. He was slick with his own blood, but it didn't matter. In the distance, he could see her, embraced by a halo of light, holding her hand out to him. Had she forgiven him? Would she take him to the halls of the Valiant? Then he felt steel in his belly, and his chest, and his back. And he lay down, and he couldn't see her anymore. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs. Resented him. Lapino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Ooh, was this... Ravens were landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lapino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off like a rabbit. Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an Oh, I am. The ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky River was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Right. Now, all Renato had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her. Then, he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up. It did sound a little risky. But Renato had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did.
Do you guys ever eat fresh food? You don't smell like it.
Renato was halfway to Zenobia's encampment when Lapino showed up. He was disheveled and distraught.
They jumped us. I barely got away. Oh, they got the core.
Oh, it was all going according to plan, thought Renato. Now he just needed Zenobia on his side. Yes, that was even better. The Iblis Stone. Zenobia could get it. And then the Emperor would have to pursue them. Wait, no. The gem would corrupt anyone, even her. That's it, he thought. Even Lapino. Even though Lapino was already a traitor. It would turn him against his secret master, the Emperor. He would try to make himself Emperor. And the Emperor would have to defend himself with the core. Boom. He was a super genius. This is terrible, Renato told the rabbit. If only I had gone for the Iblis Stone. But now it's lost in enemy territory. He handed Lapino a map. It gives the bearer so much power. We can only hope the Emperor never finds it.
What was that?
Said Lapino.
I think someone's following us.
I didn't hear anything.
Rabbit ears. You go on ahead. I'll check it out.
And with that, Lapino hopped off with the map. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. She was curled up on her bed. He'd forgotten how beautiful she was, how sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She was made of smoke, and he noticed he had a very solid blade to his throat. "Did you really think you could capture me?" purred a familiar voice. "I just wanted to chat," said Renato. "Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He needs a sacrifice, someone who truly loves him, to make a bargain with the lost gods."
That's a vicious lie.
He wants to bring them back.
That's crazy. Why would anyone...
They could make him immortal, an eater of souls. And with that, her eyes widened. She understood. Renato told her how he had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred, how he had slept in a burnt village. At midnight, the Emperor's victims had come to him in his dreams to tell him of the hideous eldritch rituals they'd been sacrificed in. He could still see those kittens and puppies, their wide, sad eyes, their moist noses.
You can't prove that.
I've got a witness at the observatory. He couldn't tell her, not yet, why he was really here. Don't you think I'd know if my...
energy balls, immune to the laws of gravity. The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken special care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared at the carnage. He didn't want me to hear. So, Renato explained his brilliant gambit. Sending Lapino to get the Iblastone, become super powerful and corrupted, provoke the Emperor into using the core against him, thus blowing up both of them, and hopefully the fleet too. "Let me visit your council," she said, shaken. "I want to help."
Could he really trust her?
Done it. He'd made Zenobia see how evil her father... What had Zenobia gone off to do? What was more important than meeting the Rebel Council? Had he made a mistake, sending her to the ruins? No. He knew they could trust her. He could trust her because she never broke it. And she could trust him because she could see right through him. Well, she'd probably be there well before him. She at least didn't have to fight her way through rainstorms of ravens. Everybody who wants to die, raise your weapon. All right. As he came around the bend, there was Lapino, unconscious on the side of the path. And Renato could smell a familiar, sweet, smoky scent. Who? Zenobia. It had to be. She never used a combat spell when she could use drowsy gas. That meant she had the Iblastone. What would it do to her? She hated her father now. She'd kill him for sure. The council wouldn't mind if she killed the Emperor, but murdering her father would destroy her. He had to get to whatever ledge she was on and talk her down from it. long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. He was on fire. So far, so good. Everyone in the council chamber was dead. Zenobia stood shivering in the courtyard, drenched in blood. Why? He managed. They started arguing with me. I lost my temper and I wanted their blood. Well, not me. The stone did. Why did you take it from Lupino? I had a plan. You had a stupid plan, she said. I'm going to go kill my father now. No, you can't. You'll just take his place. You'll become worse than him. Get out of my way, or I'll kill you too. The Empire had seized his ship. They'd have to take it back. Right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. Zenobia was in no shape to fight. But he never fought so well. He wasn't fighting for money or loot or a cause. He was fighting for her. For them. His sword danced, his feet flew, and the ravens recoiled from his ferocity. He was in a swirl of newly remembered knowledge. He needed to focus. There it was. But they did not go unnoticed. Renato landed in the middle of the Imperial fleet. The rebels were losing badly. Without leadership, it was a slaughter. Renato felt strangely free. Trying not to think about how he had lost the war. Trying not to think about how he had loved Zenobia. Blinded himself to her treachery. That's what it meant to be a hero. To keep on fighting after the most bitter of betrayals. To never know if you could trust anyone. Cats. What a waste of fur.